Okay, I'll start with roll call from my clerk. Patrick, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Warden Clark. All councillors are present for the meeting this morning. We have no councillors absent. You have quorum.
Thank you. Does anybody have to leave early today? Okay, Councillor Smith. 11? No. Councillor McKellen? 11 as well. Councillor Anderson?
By 11.
By 11. Okay, well, that'll make the budget discussions go very quickly then. Okay, I will look for the approval of the agenda. Councillor Dole.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Fryer that the agenda for the September 24th, 2024 meeting of County Council be approved.
On that motion, any questions on the agenda? Not seeing any. All in favor? That is carried. Disclosure. Do I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest by any member of council? If you find yourself in that situation later, please put up your hand, declare it at that time. Presentations and deputations, we have none. Consent agenda. Councillor Burkett. Please.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Worship. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Norcross, that the Council communications and proclamations September the 10th, 2024 to September the 23rd, 2024 have been given due consideration be received.
Okay. Any questions arising from that? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Adoption of council minutes and confirmation of committee reports. Deputy Warden Coghlan, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Locks, that the following council minutes be confirmed and adopted, and committee of the whole reports be confirmed. County Council minutes September 10th, 2024. Committee of the whole report September 10th, 2024. Committee of the whole confidential report September 10th, 2024.
Any comments or questions arising from the minutes? And all in favor? That is carried. Presentations and consideration of the Committee of the Whole reports. Chair Cox.
Good morning. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Evans, that the performance management recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report dated September 10th, 2024 be approved, including the confidential items.
Anything to be pulled from performance management? Not seeing any, so all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Chair Leduc, Human Services.
Thank you, Warden. We're at Section 9.2, the Committee of Whole Human Services report. So I have moved by myself, seconded by Councillor MacDonald, that the Human Services recommendation contained within the Committee of Whole report dated September 10th, 2024 be approved.
Anything to be pulled from Human Services? Not seeing any, so all in favor? That is carried. And Chair Dolan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Measures that the corporate services recommendations contained within the Committee of the Whole report dated September the 10th, 2024 be approved.
Any items to be pulled from the corporate? Not seeing any, so all in favor? That is carried as well. Thank you. Presentations and considerations of special committee reports, we have none. County officers' reports, we have none. Motions which notices have been given, none. Notices of motion, we have none. And closed session, we don't have any. So we're already on to the consideration of the bills. Councillor Norcross.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you, please. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Burkett, that bills number 7089-24 and 7090-24 be enacted as bylaws of the County of Simcoe.
Okay, any questions on the bills? All in favor? That is carried. So I think we made it by 11 o'clock for any of you folks that might have had to leave early. Announcements, just a reminder to council, you're invited to join the museum groundbreaking event that will be taking place following the Committee of the Whole. And we'll have lunch provided while we're over at the museum. And also, we're going to have a flag raising for, oh my gosh, I just forgot why, for French Heritage Ontario to celebrate the Franco-Canadian Day on September 25th. So we'll have the flag raising first. Then we'll head over to the museum, and then some of us get to come back and play at governance for a couple hours after that. Also, last Friday, we took place again in our second, which I hope to be, annual new citizenship ceremony here with the judge. We had 39 new Canadians. Unfortunately, we were supposed to have 41, didn't make it. Do you remember how many countries they were from, Stephanie? 21 different countries. Again, what a fabulous today to see these new Canadians and, you know, hear some of the stories on how they've struggled to get here. And they've been working with our LIP program, the Local Immigration Partnership. I want to thank them for another wonderful day and inviting some new Canadians into our family. Any other announcements? Councillor Measures.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just wanted to acknowledge and thank any of the members who may have attended the Great Northern Exhibition this past weekend. The weather was spectacular for everything across beautiful Simcoe County, but particularly for those volunteers that work to bring the Great Northern Exhibition. They've had their challenges over the years, over the decades, to have weather of, you know, all kinds of things like tornadoes and hailstorms and rain and mud. But these last 3 days, Friday through Sunday, were absolutely spectacular. A huge turnout, and I must say, the Great Northern Exhibition, of course, is all about agriculture, and I must say that the exhibition brings the culture into agriculture. They do a great job. So I want to just acknowledge the volunteers that put that on right here in our communities.
Yeah. Boy, you didn't get a better weekend for it, did you? Yeah. Any other announcements? Councillor Dolan.
Thank you, Worship. Last week, Innisfil had the Mayor's Business Breakfast. It was well attended. It was at Friday Harbor at the Lake Club, and there was a real diversity, right from students from Lakehead, Georgian, and our local high school who are in business, small startups from our DMZ to major employers. But I really brought this up to thank you, Warden Clark, for attending along with members of the County ECDEV team. It was very nice of you to come, especially during your busy season.
Thank you. No, it was a wonderful day. Nice to chat with some of the folks. Any other announcements? Okay, with that, I will look for the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Norcross.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you, moved by myself, second by Councillor Rawson, that Bill number 7091-204 be enacted as a bylaw of the County of Simcoe. Thank you.
On the bylaw, all in favor? That is carried. And now I'll look for a resolution that the September 24th, 2024 meeting of County Council be adjourned at 9:09 a.m. Moved by Councillor Fowler, second by Councillor Michael Smith. All in favor? That is carried. I don't think we need for a break right now. If Doug, you can bring our Aurelia folks in and Barrie folks. Literally. Okay, Patrick, if we can do the roll call, please.
Thank you, Warden Clark. So again, for Committee of the Whole, all members of Council are present, and with us we also have our City Reps. Aurelia Councillor Durnford is present. Aurelia Councillor Follis is present. Barrie Councillor Hamilton is absent. Aurelia Mayor McIsaac is present. Barrie Councillor Negussi is present. Barrie Mayor Nuttall is present, and Barrie Councillor Rietma is present. You have your quorum.
Thank you. Now I'll look for approval of the agenda. Councillor Dolan.
Thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Lavoie that the agenda for the September 24th meeting of the Committee of the Whole be approved.
Any questions on the agenda? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest by any member of council? Not seeing any. If you find yourself in that situation later, please put up your hand and declare at that time. Presentations and delegations in all sections, we have none. So with that, we will go on to performance management and Chair Cox.
5.1 Simcoe County Archives operations in June to August 2024. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by member Councillor Locke, second by Councillor Anderson, that item CCW 2024-260 dated September 24th, 2024 regarding Simcoe County Archives operations June to August 2024 be received. Anyone have any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move on to Human Services. Chair Leduc.
Thank you, Warden. We are at Section 6, Social Housing. 6.1, CCW 2024-254, amend the investment planning for the OPHI Year 6 funding allocation. Any comments or questions on this one? It's about refunding some of the opportunities we have. So seeing none, then I will ask for a mover. Moved by Councillor Roy, seconded by Councillor, seconded by Councillor Van Staveren. And I have that the item CCW 2024-254 dated September 24, 2024 regarding amendment to the investment plan for the OPHI Year 6 2024-2025 funding allocation be received, and the staff amend the investment plan to avoid any loss of available housing program funding and the necessary manager of social and community services and clerk to execute all associated agreements and documents necessary to carry out funding related to this amendment and any of its components. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We're into Section 7, Community Services. It is 7.1, Reaching Home 2024 to 2028 Community Plan. Questions or concerns with this one? It's a 4-year funding agreement. We have, it shows in the report all of the funding, 8.2 from the federal government. Seeing no questions or concerns, can I have a mover second, please? Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Norris. That item, CCW 2024-207, dated September 24, 2024, regarding the Reaching Home 2024 to 2028 Community Plan be received, and the proposed Reaching Home 2024-2028 Community Plan attached as Schedule 1 to item CCW 2024-207 be approved. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We are now into Section 8, Human Services, Land Ambulance, and I'll turn the floor over to our General Manager, Jane St. Clair, with the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning, Council. I'm very pleased to be joined this morning by Patrick Herview. He is our Deputy Chief of Paramedic Services to do a presentation, an update to County Council on the rollout of the new software program, dispatch software program called MPDS. And I'd also like to acknowledge Jevon Towns, who's at the back of the room. He's been in an acting commander role to assist us with this transition and has done a tremendous amount of work to help support us for this transition in November. So as part of our presentation, we'll provide just a very brief background about the changing dynamics and landscape in paramedic services. We'll talk about a little bit more about the new dispatch tool called MPDS. We'll give a brief description, talk about the benefits, how it's going to impact our resource availability. Then we'll talk about the next steps with dispatch in terms of becoming an accredited center of excellence and what that will mean for our services, greater innovation in terms of call response. We'll talk briefly about a communication plan, and we'll go over briefly FAQ, or frequently asked questions. So to begin, just a brief background about the changing landscape. So as you know, there are more and more requests for paramedic services, 911 emergency calls. In 2023, we had increased to 90,000 calls. And this year, we're anticipating a 6.3% increase over and above, so exceeding 96,000 calls. So that increase in call demand is continuing. And as such, the province of Ontario is rolling out this new dispatch tool, which we call MPDS, that will be a more sophisticated tool to really help all paramedic services across the province prioritize on those most life-threatening, time-sensitive calls. We anticipate, and DC Herview will talk a little bit more about it, but a dramatic decrease in the number of urgent life-threatening or lights and sirens calls. Currently, our highest priority calls are about 70% of those 90,000 calls, if you look at 2023, which is about 69,000 of the 90,000 are lights and sirens calls. We anticipate with the rollout of this new software tool, this new dispatch program, it will reduce to 40%, which is a very dramatic decrease, which will equate to about 32,000 calls. So almost cutting those lights and sirens calls in half. And that will have impact for tiered response as well for all of your municipalities. I think that will look at if our calls we anticipate reduce by that much to about 32,000. Looking at the history, I think the tiered calls have been approximately 42%. So we anticipate a similar trending down to approximately 15,000 calls. So we're very excited about the new software program. We know it's much better. It'll get us to the right calls. So what is MPDS? Well, it's an international standard. And it is international. It was established back in 1977. It's used in over 3,500 call centers worldwide, more than 50 countries. And as it's rolled out in the province of Ontario, it's actually overseen by a medical director and physician. And it's currently in place in 8 different regions across Ontario. So you can see Toronto, Niagara, Kenora, Thunder Bay, Ottawa, Renfrew, Peel, and Halton regions. And the process is to have every single ambulance dispatch system move to this new MPDS software program by 2028. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to DC Herview. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim Sinclair. Thank you. So today what we want to talk about is MPDS, and Jane has given a great overview. Really what it is it's more accurate prioritization of calls, because currently the system that we operate in, there's many things that happen that don't differentiate the calls. So a chest pain within a 9-year-old child who has fallen and a chest pain with an 80-year-old man who has comorbidities and certain criteria, they're treated as the same within the system. So the beauty about MPDS is it drills down to a medical, probably a better specification of what the actual emergency is. So it's classified into 5 levels, and we'll go through the 5 levels. There are color index. Other services have like Alpha Bravos. With ours, it'll be actually classified into the color codes. This gives us the ability to prioritize the 911 calls that are actually needing a high acuity response. The big change here is we're going from high acuity to low acuity, and that's the scale. Emergencies will be always prioritized through that specificity. The biggest thing is it ensures that when there is a true emergency, there will be an ambulance resource available. And this will be allowing us to deploy the right resources at the right time. And so MPDS is an exponential growth for us to be able to use our resources accordingly. And the biggest thing is that ability to redirect to a higher priority. In our current state, we don't have that ability. November 13th, we'll turn the switch on and we'll be able to reprioritize calls and say, with full specificity, we want this resource to go to this call and not go to the lower priority call. So here's the color index that we're going to be using. So purple would be your real life-threatening calls, your cardiac arrest, your chokings, ineffective breathing. You can see red is your cardiac chest pain, active seizures, active assailant, breathing problems. And then orange, you start to see the criteria go down. Your abdominal pains, your post-seizures, your bleedings. And then yellow falls mental health, minor trauma, minor collisions, and headaches. And then you get into your green, which is your fainting, sick person, and minor burns. And so this is the index that we'll be using. So in the current state that we are in with DPCI, sometimes a yellow call, because of the way it's prompted through the CAC center, it gets prioritized as a purple because they don't actually go through the algorithm with specificity of what the actual injury or trauma is. So with this index and the MPDS algorithm, we'll be able to prioritize these in a much cleaner way, sending the right resource at the right time. And so what GM Sinclair was talking about was really that huge reduction. So we will see about a 37% decrease in our Code 4 calls, which is actually a really a great thing, because we've oftentimes been driving around the community, lights and sirens, going through intersections in bad weather, and this has inherent risk with it. And we'll always do that when the emergency requires it. However, the rate we were doing at the past with the DPCI process is actually a little bit flawed and could add to some danger in the community. So we're very happy to see that change. The really big thing here is the triaging and knowing which resource to send at what time. Again, when we look at the community safety part, that lights and sirens is paramount. And then the improving resource management. This is something that we've always struggled with, because we know from the calls that a higher call priority, it requires, oh, I didn't touch anything. Sorry. We know that a higher call priority requires a higher response and faster, and we never had that ability because they were triaged the same, and the province would never allow you. So you could literally be going to a severe nosebleed, and a child unconscious would come in, and they would not reprioritize them. They were treated as the same because of the way it is. So now we'll have the ability to redirect at all times. So we'll be going to service a low acuity emergency. Oh, something just happened around the corner that's a high acuity, we redirect. In our current state, we don't have that ability. So we're very excited to see that come. And then really around the balancing, the paramedics' expertise is the best unit selection for low acuity calls. So currently right now, we have advanced care and primary care. The goal is if a call comes in as a green, we don't necessarily have to send an advanced care. We can send a primary care. And then if the advanced care is on a low priority call, and a high priority call comes in, we want to use that medical expertise and reassign them. That's the beautiful goal about MPDS. So current state obviously is 77% Code 4. Happy to see it go to 40%. And we've seen this across the province to the other services that have actually gone through MPDS. So the data and the literature is there. Resource availability. So really this process is medically validated, and the questions that the dispatchers use are very pointed, they're very specific to get these people in through an intake to triage their emergency accurately and send the right resource. The high acuity calls will always be serviced immediately. There will be no delays to any emergency in the community at any time. The low acuity calls may be serviced by an ambulance traveling from a greater distance, so that could cause a slight delay, but again, it's medically okay. It's been validated through data, through science, to say, if you have a broken leg, it's painful. We understand that. But if somebody's having a heart attack, they're the higher priority right now, and we'll get to you as soon as we can. And so it's just given us a little bit of flexibility to use the right resources at the right place. So when resources are at peak demand across the entire county, the ministry has set times that we can actually wait. Again, those times are set by the ministry. We will try to make sure that we're even better than those times every chance and opportunity we have. It really comes down to resource management. The ambulance dispatch centers will conduct callback checks with the calls that are waiting, just to make sure that if there's any condition in the patient's history or the fall or whatever injury it is, if it needs to be re-triaged, they will be making callbacks. They leave them with actual, specific information saying if your condition changes, please call back. We'll call you back in this set of time, and that's set by the province. And so MPDS is an accredited center of excellence. So our Georgian Ambulance Service dispatch service here in Barrie, is their goal with MPDS is to become an accredited center of excellence. This is something that they have to do through a call auditing process and a QA process. And once they actually get this, we actually have an expansion of what's called an Omega protocol, where we could build local programs to help capture a certain call type that we see trends in the community. So that would be outside of those indexes that we saw. We'd be able to launch this Omega protocol, working with our medical directors, base hospitals, et cetera. So those are very, very exciting things that we've never had, because we always just had to respond to whatever the emergency was at that time. This will allow us to look at the data and possibly build programs within the communities. And then the communications plan. So this is a big initiative. Obviously, it's to create awareness of MPDS, what it is, and educate all the audiences to support the change management. We understand that the public and the staff and the community partners in emergency services, the municipal partners, counselors, you may get calls. We're happy to talk to everyone. Our goal is to try to inform everyone prior to the launch and really get everybody informed. And we have a multitude of resources. We have website links, and you can see phase 1 is a soft launch, is a public web page. That's actually up and running. And then there's a very detailed public FAQ that we'll be sending out and everyone has access to. Phase 2 is really around leveraging the website and the social media, and then direct communications and media relations and some printed materials. This is targeted communication for all our stakeholders and partners. And just so you're all aware, we've met with all municipal fire partners. We've met with all municipal hospitals, agencies, polices, OPP, local agencies. We started these conversations far before we actually needed to get everybody informed and everybody comfortable with the new changes that are coming down. And again, phase 3 would be to enhance phase 1 assets and look at some marketing promotion and leveraging existing channels for reaching residents. So this is some of the questions that we suspect you may see. So, why the change? Well, the change is because life-threatening conditions really need to receive the quickest, highest level of out-of-hospital care. And it minimizes the risk of paramedics being occupied with non-urgent calls, and that's the current system we reside in. And how does MPDS work? Well, it works by using a very prescriptive piece of language to drive down where the patient's injuries are with a very high specificity of acuity. So based on that severity, then we could resource allocate if it's high acuity, low acuity. This is a very trusted tool that's known internationally, and it identifies those emergencies and those 5 priority levels that we discussed earlier. And then what are the expected benefits of this new system? Well, the real true benefits is the most urgent calls with the top priorities will be serviced very quickly with better outcomes, because right now everything is sent out at a higher priority, and it doesn't require it. So all of our resources are being eaten up by lower priority calls. Some are still high priorities, and we service those, and they have great outcomes. The issue is we have too many of them on low acuity calls that sometimes we could get caught with not servicing a high acuity. So that's the goal, is MPDS changes that. It allows us that flexibility to pivot when we have to. And then the biggest thing is that improved public safety, that our ambulances aren't driving around your communities with lights and sirens when not necessary. If you see an ambulance post November 13 with lights and sirens, that they're going to a true emergency that we've used and shown through the MPDS system. Another one is, will non-urgent issues still get help? Absolutely. We will never stop caring for the community. Low priority calls just may take a little bit longer, and that will be spoken with the dispatchers and the callers to say, listen, you may experience a delay. We're having a higher number of calls right now that are high acuity, and there'll be some framework and discussion around callbacks, et cetera. So if the low priority call, like a broken ankle or a sprained or a flu, they will get care. They will get care as quickly as possible. It just depends on where we are on that day, on that time with resource management. And then what is your situation? What if your situation changes while you're waiting? And that's where the patient will receive regular check-ins from the 911 system. The dispatchers will be calling them back. And then if the situation worsens, they're told to call back. And obviously they'll reprioritize when they're calling back. So if they call back and the patient says, I've fainted now and now I'm vomiting, and then they start to go down a different prompt, it could be upgraded to a different priority so that we service it quicker. So the real big thing is what happens when you call 911 is the dispatch staff will be asking you more questions. So for the layman who like myself, I've never called 911 in a long time, those questions are just going to be more drilled down. So we're not going to see a lot of change. So if you've never called 911, the only difference is now they ask a lot more questions November 13th and on than they would today. And that's a great thing. That's to help understand what the nature of the true emergency is so we can service it accordingly. And again, it ensures the right help at the right time. And it's really important to answer all the questions. So that's what we really want to say to all the public is, I know it's maybe long and they're asking you a lot of questions in an emergency where you're scared and you're stressed, but please answer the questions to the best of your abilities, because the way you answer your questions will dictate the response you will get. So if you actually slowly and articulate what is going on, that'll give us a higher specificity of what resource you require on that emergency. Another one is be prepared to repeat some answers and questions. That's one of the things we've seen with a new system. Like anything, there's a learning curve, so we expect that the 911 communicator may ask you to ask some questions again. A big one you might hear from your allied agencies that we already talked about with OPP and the police and the fire dispatchers is currently they'll call and say, we have an emergency, can you send a bus, can you send a resource? well, no, we can't anymore. We actually have to understand what is happening on the call that you're in and in that call share. So we've already got ahead of that with communication, and we hope that everyone understands that we have to be more specific in answering our questions. And so, some of the questions you'll hear out there is, why have you waited a while for the ambulance to arrive? Well, because paramedics are busy on urgent, high priority calls, and your call is important. However, it's been deemed to be, whatever it is in those categories, it's acceptable to have some sort of a delay. It's still, again, it's not our goal to delay any call. Our goal is when the system is taxed, we have the ability to delay when necessary. But we will never delay for any reason other than the system being overwhelmed. Do non-urgent calls get dispatched immediately if there are no urgent calls? All non-urgent calls will be dispatched immediately. If all things considered and the resources are available, we will service our calls within the 911 system like we always have. The difference here is really if we have to allocate the resource to a higher priority call, we can divert. So that's one of the big ones that we want to stress. And again, I'll hand it over to GM Sinclair.
So this is all about getting the right resources to the right call, the right time. And as follow-up to this, I will be sending all county councillors some information via email. So you'll receive some of the key messages once the rollout happens. A copy of the frequently asked questions. Will provide you with a link to the MPDS section on our website and a specific email. So if you do receive questions that aren't covered in the FAQ, for example, there's a direct email that you can contact to say, here's the questions I'm getting. Can you provide some support on this question? So we'll remind again as we get closer, but November 13th will be here very soon. It has been very, very positive as it's begun to roll out across the province, but we know the public have come forward when it has started to transition to ask the municipalities questions because as DC Herview said, some of the lower priority calls may be delayed in terms of when they receive paramedics. So we anticipate there will be questions from the general public with this rollout. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, Council, thank you. Thank you so much for that presentation. Appreciate that. Well done and great data out there. So I'm going to start right up here with Councillor Dolan, and I'll go to Councillor Fowler next.
Thank you very much for that information. We know it's been rolled out with great success. I think Toronto and Niagara were the first, and I know AMO has been advocating for it across the rest of the province since then, so really happy to see this happen. But because we've had all this experience in the areas that it's been rolled out, I have two questions. One of them is, how will this effectively or practically change with volunteer firefighters or indeed full-time firefighters? Will they see less calls, more calls? You said you've had conversations with the fire departments, and what are you telling them?
Thank you, through you, Chair. The thing we're saying to the fire departments is the tiered agreements have not changed. So you're still going to go to the emergencies that you went to. However, they will be drilled down a little bit more precisely. So they may see a decrease in calls. And the conversations we've had with our partners is they're actually grateful for it, because oftentimes they'll go to a call and they'll say, we really don't have a role here. This is not something we can support. Again, when it needs, a defibrillator or urgent care, they will still be going and they will still be supporting the communities, and we love that relationship. I think what this allows us to do is say to them, for the calls that are not medically warranted for your response, you don't need to be there anymore.
And one more, if I could, Mr. Chair, and that's around triaging. So, we know that some of our, what do I want to call them, heavy users of our 911 have the other jurisdictions that have had this for a while. Do they catch on to the triaging, and do they start answering the questions with a higher acuity so they get an ambulance faster?
Through your Chair, thank you for that question. We haven't actually seen that specifically. However, the questions are very good at drilling down the true emergency. Realistically, we can't deny care to anybody. If they answer the questions the right way, we have a due diligence to respond. So we haven't seen that, but however, I think what it will do is it will really tier the emergency the right way and the response. And so people will understand if your high frequency callers will will be like, well, they're just not coming in time. So that's what we hope to see. However, again, we're not in control of how they answer the questions. We have to respond accordingly. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you for those questions. I have now Councillor Fowler next, and I have Councillor Brian Smith right after.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to get a point of clarification. I'm hearing the information. Are we saying that at this particular point in time, due to the questions being asked in the 911 call center, that we can't react in real time and alter? As you said, like a child with a chest issue versus a child with a nosebleed, they can't alter the course on the way to the call. They alter it once they get there and assess. So with this new information, you're stating that if they're on their way to the child with a nosebleed, because of the questions which go into greater depth, they can midway to the call divert to the appropriate places. Is that my understanding?
Thank you for your question, Your Chair. Yes, that's exactly it. So what it is the emergency that the ambulance is going to, they'll continue to go. If any call comes in with a higher acuity, they will absolutely divert. Once the diversion starts, they'll resend an ambulance to the other call based on resources.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I now have Councillor Smith next, and then I have Councillor Laux. You're okay, Councillor Ben? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, again, I'll state that we cannot praise our paramedics enough. As I say, you never pass a paramedic station and see anyone sitting around. And when you do, you kind of feel good for that individual that they're actually getting a break. So thank you for all that you do. I know that we've been looking at different systems for quite some time, and I can't tell you how happy I am to hear that this is the one that we're going to be bringing into play and bringing it into play soon. And so although we all think it's great, and I know that the county will do a phenomenal job in how we put this out and educate our communities, but I would highly recommend that we get packages out to each and every one of our municipalities so as that we can speak to this at the local level at our council meetings as quickly as possible, and that our municipalities through our social media pages, so on and so forth, can also push this out. I think this is only going to be as successful as not only what we do on our side, which I know will be top-notch, but the education that we give the public to understand how the system works and why we're doing what we're doing. So, again, kudos to you for all your hard work and dedication, and I'm looking forward to seeing this as quickly as possible. I also know that our firefighters are looking forward to seeing this as quickly as possible. I don't know about other communities, but with Saga Beach, we face on average anywhere between 1,000 and 1,200 calls monthly, of which the vast majority are medical calls, and we hear all the time that, you know, we've arrived and really we didn't need to be there. So I think there's significant financial savings, significant wear and tear, not only on our equipment but on our firefighters as well, and we'll be getting the right people to the right time. The only other thing I'd end with is I certainly hope that we're soon looking at some kind of camera system for our ambulances that can snap a photo of vehicles that are simply not following the rules of the road and pulling over for ambulances. This summer I witnessed this on numerous occasions. It absolutely amazes me how many people do not yield right away to our ambulances, our fire department and police cars. And I think we need to find a solution to this, and I think it needs to be through fines. They need to be heavy, but we need to find a way to capture that. And the simple camera on our vehicles would be perfect. Thank you very much.
Just in response to that, we'll ensure that we produce packages and send them out to all municipalities. That's a great suggestion. And we'll ensure we include our friends at the cities of Barrie and Orillia as well in those information packages. And to your point, I think communication will be really critical as we transition. So we'll stay connected to the local municipalities, the local fire services, hospitals, et cetera, as this begins to roll out. And in terms of the dash cam came to mind, but in terms of the vehicles not yielding for emergency, we are looking at options for that at this current time. So thank you for those comments.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smith. They were great comments and great questions. I now have Councillor Laux next, and then the City of Orillia Rep, Councillor Follis.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a quick scenario type question. So you have a redirection that happens, and the bus is going to A, is now going to B. Do you call out a second bus for A, or does does it go by location of where the buses are? Like, how, just a better understanding on how that's going to work, please.
Thank you, Chair. That's a great question. That's the perfect segue. So we have multiple responses within the community. We have ambulances. We have the rapid response units that you've seen. We have our IRU specific tactical team, as well as we have our quality care program out there, which works with our fire departments with training, and then we have our CP paramedics. So what happens is if we have to divert and we don't have a bus that's near the incident, we should have a rapid response unit that will be able to deploy and at least get there to render some care. And that's where we've built that in our algorithm to say, what's the best unit given scenario A, B, C, D. So every time something gets redirected, something gets filled into its place. And that might be something that requires it. So prime example, if it's specific to hazardous materials or some sort of police, we'll send that tactical team. If it's related to an exacerbation of a chronic medical condition, we'll now have the ability to send our community paramedicines. So we're really using the right care to the right patient at the right time. And that's the benefit. We've never had that flexibility within our resources.
Okay, thank you. Secondary. Do you perceive any backlash that a person, say, that had the first call is getting redirected and then maybe, say, another redirection happens and the time frame becomes, say, from half an hour to 3 hours? Do you anticipate any sort of backlash from the public that I'm not getting service quick enough, even though I called first?
Great question. Our hope is that people understand that the system, and again, that's through public education, working with your constituents to say that if you're waiting, somebody else had an emergency that required that care. And I would hope that somebody would be okay with saying, I'm happy to have somebody else have the right care, and I'll wait. Our goal is to not make anybody wait. And will there be some situations where it arises? Probably. And we'll deal with those, and we'll review how we could get a better response. But realistically, our hope is that the community understands it's caring about everybody, and getting that high acuity call service is the priority.
Okay, thank you very much. An excellent presentation and program. It looks great.
Thank you for those comments and questions. I now have our City of Orillia Rep, Councillor Follis, and then I have Councillor Corbell next.
Thanks very much. Obviously, very supportive and great presentation. Sounds like a really interesting initiative. I had a couple of questions just on this front. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. The first question was, curious, I noticed bleeding was categorized as orange. I guess that's situation dependent. That's what I figured. Another question was on page 59 of our agendas. It goes, what happens when you call 911? And there's mention there of, and I think you already identified it, the need to be very clear in answering the questions and how that can help with diversion. Curious, is that something that's mentioned during the call as well as through an informational package? I didn't know if you wanted to field that one. The other question I had was, if patients considered in the green zone, so very low risk, is there some interaction between the dispatch and the individual about whether there's alternative methods of transportation? So those were the three big questions I guess I had, but yeah, certainly supportive and glad this is coming forward. Thanks.
Thank you, through your chair. Thank you for that question. Yeah, so the bleeding category is actually the best way to inform you. For the DPCI2, we currently work with what's called 60 index cards, so about 60 cards where you would derive what the emergency is. We're going to over 2,000 cards. So that bleeding is, how long has it been bleeding? What does the bleeding look like? How much volume? It narrows it down in specificity. The reality with the actual the bleeding would be triaged accordingly. That's how it works. The system is made for that. The dispatchers will communicate. My understanding is that they will say, okay, there's an ambulance on its way. They don't tell the individual you're in the green. They just say an ambulance is on the way. We'll call back, and it's based on the actual the way it was triaged and dispatched.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those questions. Councillor Corbell.
Thank you, Chair. Just thanks very much for the presentation. In a nutshell, I'm looking at this as emergency room triaging in the field, and it makes a whole lot of sense. In particular, the piece about not having to travel with lights and sirens going on, because that is a risk to not only the operators but also residents and other traffic. I have two questions, if you don't mind. Number one is, for an unknown trouble call where the information is not necessarily available, but it might be in regards to a medical situation, shots fired, lots of different scenarios I can think of where it's fragmented information, nothing more is available. How would that particular call be treated in this system, given that there's so many unknowns?
Great question, through the chair. There is call prompts where if you don't get enough information, you have to triage it accordingly. Our goal is to work with our community partners, police, fire, whatever dispatcher, to get as much information as we can towards the scene. And if it's based on an unknown, correct me if I'm wrong, Commander Towns, it is dispatched out of red, correct?
Correct. It's an open-ended question that would, if you tell me what happened, they say shooting, then it would lead down a certain path, and it would be questions that would be, are they there, do you see them hurt, and then go down individualized paths. If the questions do come up and are consistently unknown, they can go with a red, it would be a unknown style.
Thank you. And my second question is in respect to text telephone calls from people who are looking for emergency services. Takes them longer to communicate. Is there anything in the system that would permit a different order of questions or a reduced number of questions so that those calls might get prioritized a little bit quicker, given that they have to take more time to communicate with dispatch and now there's more questions?
Yeah, my understanding is that the dispatch center actually is using new technology and telephony as well as other resources they have within the system to actually answer those calls more appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor. I'll go back to Councillor Locks then, and Councillor Follis right after again.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a quick question. How would a 911 hang-up be taken care of then? Because I know there's ideally you get a response call back, and if you get no answer, how does that get dealt with? Please, thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. I'll ask Commander Towns. I believe that they'll require callback and then they'll triage accordingly.
If you can also use your microphone next time, if you don't mind, so everybody can hear, because we want the audience to hear also. Thank
awesome.
you.
Okay,
Further
thank
comments?
you.
You're done? Okay, thank you. Back to Councillor Follis, and I've got Councillor Snell next.
Thanks so much. Just a quick follow-up question. Do we know or anticipate how often we'd get into a situation where we'd need to divert ambulances accordingly? Is this an everyday situation? Is this a once-a-week situation? Just if you could speak to that. Thanks.
Thank you, through your chair. Currently, we don't have an exact number because it's truly dependent on the call volume per day. However, effectively, we think anecdotally through our practices that we will see diversion a couple times a day based on the emergencies, but we really don't know the full scope. So our goal is to study the data as it comes in to realize, do we have to change our response matrix for said programs to be successful?
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Snell, and then I've got Councillor Dolan next.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, great presentation. I was surprised to see, given that we're facing a mental health crisis, that mental health was such a low priority, being a yellow. Are you looking at developing a specialized mental health division that will respond to those types of calls, given that somebody experiencing a panic attack or a manic episode can become a very frightening situation and potentially very dangerous? If you could address that, please.
So thank you, through your chair. Great question. So one of the things that we've looked at for the county is applying what's called models of care. This is where we have an alternate response for calls, and that's exactly the situation that we would be able to send one of our CP paramedics with a crisis worker who would try to render care within the 911 system, but not at that priority, like lights and sirens, but they'd be able to divert to it. And our goal is to expand that program, and that's kind of where we were talking about the Omega protocols, is looking for some of the things that we have within our communities that we can help. And so that CP is absolutely, that's our goal.
Follow up?
Thank you, Chair. That makes me so happy because, you know, we see with OPP that they've started to expand some of their support services to have a crisis worker that can specialize in mental health. But it is such a specialty. So to be able to have a specific group to be able to support those residents is absolutely critical. So I'm very, very happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just supplemental, we have had a model of care for mental health specifically submitted to the province, and it has been approved. And what DC Hervey was talking about is a pilot that we've received year one of a multi-year pilot in partnership with the Barrie Police and the Community Mental Health Association. Whereas when a mental health call is received, depending on the nature of the call, our CP trained community paramedic with additional training in mental health response will respond with a mental health worker. So we're very excited. We'll be providing council with more information as we receive more updates from the province. But it is, I think, a long-awaited program to be able to more appropriately to respond to these individuals in the community that need our help. So we'll keep council posted about that, but very exciting in the near future.
All right, thank you. And I've got Councillor Dolan, and then I'll have Councillor Van Staveren last. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question that was prompted by other questions. So we know we're moving to next generation 911 sometime. Is this system compatible with NG 911?
Thank you, through your chair. Yes, this is the goal. Intended goal was to run MPS with NG 911 as well as help our communications across. So we've just had our provincial rollout, new radio system. This is effectively revolutionizing the way we deliver care in the community.
Excellent, thank you. And then Councillor Van Staveren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment that came out, one of the other speakers. Is our system set up to handle text messages for 911? And with we drilling down with this triage, is anything going to change with that?
Yeah, thank you, through your chair. Yes, the goal is to look at those. That's coming part of the NG 911 is my understanding, as well as they use operators and different technology within the CAC system right now to be able to facilitate those calls.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you for all those questions, and I'm thank you for answering them and being here to give that presentation. This program has been coming around for a long time. We first seen it in the Niagara region, and it seemed to be very effective there. I've got faith in this. I know it is, and I think Councillor Smith picked up on it, that we should share this out, make sure we get all the information we can to our residents so they understand the program. But it's in 35,000 ambulance communication centers in 46 different countries. So there is some definite groundwork that's been done before us, and we'll be certainly taking those advantages of those information that's out there. So thank you again. I have a recommendation, so can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Locke, seconded by Deputy Warden Coghlan. That item, CCW 2024-268, dated September 24, 2024, regarding informational update on the implementation of the medical priority dispatch system be received. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Great discussion on that one. We will now move on to Section 9, Human Services, Long-Term Care. We have Section 9.1. We have CCW 2024-267, base funding for behavioral specialized unit in Georgian Manor. Comments or questions for that? We can see we have our permanent funding now of the tune of $1 million for our behavioral unit, 16 beds. Questions or concerns? Seeing none. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Sandhu, seconded by Councillor Norris. That item, CCW 2024-267, dated September 24, 2024, regarding base funding for 16 long stay beds to operate as a designated behavioral specialized unit at Georgian Manor be received. All in favor? Did you have a question? Okay, let's go. Sorry, we had the vote, but the question, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair to Jane. Jane, are we seeing an increase in these in behavioral issues, and is there a hope that maybe more beds will be put out? I'm just wondering because I've heard different people talk about it, and it's very hard to find a placement.
Thank you for the question, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, is the short answer. We're seeing a significant increase in the prevalence of dementia and other cognitive issues as our population becomes older. And with that, we see what we call the term responsive behaviors. And it really requires a very specialized approach in care planning so that individuals can live in long-term care homes or other community settings. So this behavioral support program at Georgian Manor supports these types of needs across the entire region. We're thrilled that we have now, it's moved from a pilot stage to full approval as a permanent support for the region. And of note, as a provider, we also provide an outreach program. We have approximately 35 staff that go into all 26 long-term care homes across the region that also provide this specialized support. We have applied to have a second BSTU with the redevelopment of Simcoe Manor because it is such a growing need. So more information to come to council in the future on that. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Okay, we're moving on to 9.2 then, and one of my favorites is National Senior Day. Questions, concerns with this? Well, if you read the report, it is really a special day on October 1st. We get to enjoy our favorite treat, ice cream. Okay, so we hope to see everybody out on October 1st enjoying ice cream at our long-term care homes and our senior service departments. So I will ask for mover. Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Measures, that item CCW 2024-265, dated September 24, 2024, regarding National Seniors Day be received. All in favor? Unanimous. Looks like we'll all be there. Great. Okay. Yeah. Maybe we'll. Okay, I'm on section 10, other matters for consideration. Does anybody have any other matters for consideration? All right. Seeing none. Warden, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, and I want to thank the city reps for joining us and for your input. And it's still early. Why don't we roll right into corporate services? Chair Dolan.
Thank you, Warden. So we're at 11, Corporate Services Planning, 11.1, which is a request for delegation of approval authority for plans of subdivision and condominium for the Township of Tiny. Questions or comments on this report? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, and through the chair, on behalf of the Township of Tiny, I'd like to extend our sincere appreciation for the association that we have with the County of Simcoe, especially with regards to the work of your planning and department, and we look forward to continuing that in the future. This is an initiative that was started by current council in Township of Tiny to change past direction. Over 40 years now, we have been designated a no-growth zone, so to speak, within the County of Simcoe, and 40 years ago that made sense. Our population now is over 60% permanent. A lot of people living there full-time that are looking for larger services, and people just want to move into our lovely township. So this gives us the opportunity to have some little local control, hopefully provide better decision-making and more responsive to planners and developers in our area. We have a new planning director who is keen and eager to move forward. Still being a rural area, obviously our growth will be centered on our settlement areas. So we're really excited, really looking forward to doing this. Our next item that Nathan will be talking about came at the same time, so the timing is perfect for us with the provincial planning statement coming into place, so we'll be able to look at our 5 settlement areas and create more happy people in Tiny. So just in conclusion, thank you again so much for your work on this. Nathan, thanks so much for everything, and again, we look forward to working with you in the future and making Tiny and the County of Simcoe better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, then have it moved by Councillor Evans and seconded by Councillor Walker that item CCW 2024-229 dated September 24th, 2024 regarding the Township of Tiny's request for delegation of approval authority for plans of subdivision and condominium be received, and that the necessary bylaw and signed memorandum of understanding be presented to County Council for approval to delegate approval authority for plans of subdivision and condominium within the geographic area of the Township of Tiny to to the Council of the Township of Tiny in accordance with Planning Act Regulation OREG 297-97, substantively in the form attached as Schedule 1 to item CCW 2024-229. All those in favor of that recommendation? Any opposed? That is carried. Next, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Jim Elliott to introduce Tiffany Thompson, Manager of Planning, who will be providing a presentation regarding the new, what used to be called the Provincial Policy Statement, which is now the Provincial Planning Statement, which comes into effect on October the 20th. Jim Elliott.
Thank you, Chair Dolan. As I'm sure most members of Council are aware, the province has decided to move away from the growth plan as the provincial framework for planning in Ontario. So as of October 20th, we'll be working under the premise of the provincial planning statement, and staff are here today to walk you through some of the highlights and summarize that for you. So I'm introducing to you today our Manager of Planning, Tiffany Thompson, and of course you know our Chief Planner and Director of Planning, Nathan Westerndorp. So thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Jim Elliott. We're here to present just an overview, brief overview, more details in the staff report of the provincial planning statement. And as Jim Elliott said, the provincial planning statement is coming into effect fairly soon. So it was released on August 20th, and it will replace the existing provincial policy statement as well as the growth plan. The effective date of that will be October 20th. So any planning applications made on that date or after that date will have to be in compliance with the new PPS 2024. So the plan has a lot of vision statements and goals in the document, but I think probably the one that's most well known is the 1.5 million homes by 2031. And there's a number of provincial policy directions in the document about building more housing, making more land available, job creation, planning for transportation and other infrastructure, as well as protecting the environment and farmland and other key assets, as well as protecting people and property away from natural hazards and human-made hazards. So some key changes, we've just kind of done a brief overview. Some key changes are in housing and employment, settlement area boundary expansions and settlement areas. But of note, there's no substantial changes to a couple key items that are kind of important to the county related to agricultural, natural heritage, mineral aggregates. Those policies haven't changed dramatically between the 2020 version and the 2024 version. However, the removal of the growth plan, which has been in place in this area for about 20 years, is somewhat significant. So there was a whole sub-Simcoe section in the growth plan, only community municipality to have a special section. So that has been removed, and that section had sections related to population allocation, employment, and so it was very Simcoe specific. There's also a lack of requirement for municipal comprehensive reviews. So those were required for settlement area boundary expansions, for land conversions, employment areas, and those are no longer required to be done by the upper tier. So there's also removal of prescribed intensification targets in the delineated boundary, as well as removal of limited rural residential and rural employment policies. So those we've relied on for the last 20 years to limit any sort of growth and development in the rural areas. So talking about housing, so there's growth targets. Now the growth targets are coming from the Ministry of Finance instead of the Ministry of Municipal Housing Affairs. So a little bit different, but we can continue to use the previous targets that were established underneath the growth plan. So those are in our county plan right now, in a lot of the local plans, so we can continue to use those until such time that we want to change those. Forecasting is available now for at least 20 years, but not more than 30 years. So we can do infrastructure planning more than 30 years, but not actually land use planning. There's also a note, again, that this isn't required to be done through a municipal comprehensive review. There's a clarification on MZOs, which is helpful. So any MZOs that are generating population can be added to the population forecast. So that's helpful. That was a lack of clarification that planners had. So that has been clarified in this new document. There's also a note about coordination with the service manager relates to housing, and particularly affordable housing. So the county is a service manager, so we'll have more coordination and more direction to coordinate planning applications related to housing at the local level and at the county level. Intensification and density. There's no specific intensification or density targets as required under the growth plan. But the targets are to be set out by each municipality, and we can continue to use the targets that we already have set in our plans. There's also a brief note about shopping malls and plazas that have been specifically identified for residential intensification and encouraged to do so. So speaking about settlement areas, as I mentioned, there's a removal of delineated built boundaries. So this is the built-up areas, a line around the built-up area that existed in 2006. So this line is now removed. There was policies related to that, and that was related to growth plan, and particularly intensification targets. Again, the Simcoe subsection area has been removed. So all of those very specific policies that relate to population, and particularly the settlement area hierarchy, which was very specific to Simcoe County. So that identified the primary settlement areas. There's 6 of those. All of those policies have now been removed because the growth plan is being deleted, removed. So we'll need to continue to look at how we want to deal with the settlement hierarchy, as well as the economic districts and strategic employment areas. There's 4 of those within the county as well. Settlement area boundary expansions, which is probably the one that's gotten the most press out of this recent release, they're no longer subject to municipal comprehensive reviews. So again, that's not completed by the upper tier anymore. Municipalities can consider settlement area boundary expansions. These applications can be brought forward by a municipality, by a landowner, and they're now appealable. Before they weren't appealable, and that is a change underneath Bill 185. The tests for boundary expansions are still in place in this new provincial document, but they're a little bit less stringent than the previous growth plan targets, again, because it was required to be done at the upper tier level and done at very municipal comprehensive review stage, but you still need to comply with the forecasted growth targets. Just a note about strategic growth areas and major transit station areas. There's only 2 in the county. That policy has been carried forward from the growth plan into this document, so we'll apply provincial-wide now. The 2 MTSAs are in Bradford and in Innisfil, and we'll just continue to make sure that those are delineated, and there's policies to encourage high-density development around those transit stations. Employment, there's been some changes in employment related to a 300-meter setback. So this is a kind of a new mitigation measure that the province has asked for. So this will be something we'll need to update in our zoning bylaws and our official plan documents for existing and planned employment areas. There's a new policy requiring designation and protection of employment areas. Most municipalities have these protections in them as they're related to the growth plan policies. But now, again, this is going province-wide. So these policies are going to apply to everyone. There's a conversion for lands now possible not through an MCR process. This, again, is the difference with the growth plan being removed. That process would have had, if someone wanted to remove lands or take lands out of an employment area designation, those would have had to come to the upper tier and had to go through the municipal comprehensive review process. Now those can be applied for at the local level and go through those planning processes. There's also a new definition of employment area, which was introduced in Bill 185. This definition, we're still all working through it right now, definition may impact standalone permissions in employment areas for things like institutional uses or standalone office uses, which are traditionally found in employment areas. And the new definition requires those to be in conjunction with a defined employment use. So there may be some issues with future permissions in those areas and how those areas are designated and protected. So that's something we're unpacking right now. So the rural areas, generally these policies are consistent with the previous version of the plan. But again, just noting the removal of the growth plan policies, which planners have relied on since 2006 to limit rural and rural residential growth and rural employment growth. Those policies are now no longer in place. So we may see more pressures in the rural area to permit residential and employment growth. Those may result in local official plan amendments or county official plan amendments, since there's no provincial policy not permitting that to move forward. There's also a note here about the rural septage capacity. This is the effluent that's coming out of your septic systems that are in the rural areas and what the capacity in the county is to treat that. So if there's going to be any pressures and development within the rural areas, we really need to look at that capacity issue. There was a study done in 2016 that we are looking to update. That's a recommendation of the report to fully understand where that septage can be treated within the county and if there's capacity to do so, along with the settlement areas that are growing. And most importantly, the agricultural policies are fairly consistent. So this is just an update on, there's a new agri-systems approach, which is kind of related to the growth plan policies and how the growth plan was structured. There's an agri-food network system policy, so we're focusing on that local food source. And there's also clarification on additional residential units. So, which is great because it's a very clear policy now that can permit up to 3 residential units on a farm, same in the rural area, but it's subject to tests. So minimum distance separation, servicing the buildings close in the farm cluster, but no severances are permitted of these additional residential units. So they're supposed to be staying intact with the farm, allowing there to be some additional either additional family on the farm or in conjunction with farm help. The previous version of the draft version of the PPS had some additional severance policies in the agricultural system. There were some proposals about allowing more severances. Those have not been allowed in this version. So it is status quo on what the current system is of farm lot creation in the agricultural areas. It's very limited, still for farm consolidation and for large farm severances. So, and I'm going to hand over the presentation to Nathan to talk about implementation and transition of the plan.
Thanks very much, Tiffany. I really appreciate that overview. And we're cognizant of the fact that your local planners are also giving you an overview, so that's why we went through that. But we're also cognizant of the fact that 18 years of fairly prescriptive growth planning through the provincial growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe is departing on October 19th and into October 20th. And October 20th is a new realm in planning. So with the flexibility of the new provincial planning statement comes also some responsibility that we as planners at the local level, it's no longer are we looking to the growth plan saying, well, it told us to do this. Now it's, how do we grow well? How do we grow well as local municipalities and as a county as a whole? So, and as many of you know, the planning system is not static. So when we talk about implementation, how do we move forward with the applications that are in play, that are in consideration with changing policy environment? Because we all know that through the public process, which is a key to the planning process, we can't change our policies on a dime. So what does that mean? Implementation. One of the key fundamentals of the implementation part of the new PPS, let's call it PPS 2024, is that as of October 20th, any municipal decision that's made on a planning matter has to be consistent with the PPS, regardless of what the municipal planning documents say. So where that really comes into play is if your municipal planning documents are inconsistent, vehemently opposed in their principle to what the new PPS is proposing and implementing, that could be an issue. There are cases where local and county policies are allowed to be more prescriptive, a little more directional, and that's okay. But we really, all of our local planners, as well as our county staff, we're all reviewing our documents to do a bit of a triage. Where are those points of potential concern where we know our policies, because they were birthed in the growth plan, where they're perhaps inconsistent with the new PPS, and those are some things that we need to be aware of. It also, as Tiffany alluded to before, there's some fairly prescriptive policies in the county plan that we used to be able to say, well, the growth plan doesn't allow it, and the conversation pretty much stops there. Now that the PPS might allow things, we might be requiring a few more county OPAs, walking through that process until we update our county official plan and the local official plans accordingly. And finally, what's the impact on all the local official plans that are either underway or about to get underway? Well, many of you have OPs that are before us today, and your planners have had considerable forethought about this day coming, which is great. Many of the documents and the policies have been written to be PPS 2024 friendly, which is great. There's not a lot of pivoting that we all have to do together. And those that are about to go through the process, they have the luxury of being able to take the new PPS and write the new policies and work through the public process accordingly. What's the county official plan and what's the county upper tier planning role? Well, in the context of outside of Bill 23, until proclamation comes, the county official plan will look and feel a little different. As Tiffany said, the PPS 2024 is not nearly as prescriptive as the growth plan, especially when it comes to upper tiers and especially when it comes to Simcoe County. So what will we be doing? Well, it says where planning is conducted by an upper tier municipality like Simcoe County, the upper tier municipality in consultation with the lower tiers shall identify and allocate population, housing, and employment projections for lower tier municipalities. And interestingly enough, earlier on in the PPS policies, it also says the county is responsible for allocating units. And that's a new but subtle change. It used to be under growth plan, we allocated population, employment, and it was a very collaborative process, but it was just forecasts, population, employment. This introduction of units is a new but subtle change that we all have to walk through together. Identify areas where growth and development will be focused. That includes strategic growth areas, but it also includes the 93 settlement areas that we already have established since 2006. Identify minimum density targets for growth and development taking place in new and expanded settlement areas. So the concept of new expanded settlement areas, when the county is working with all the local municipalities on expansions to settlement areas, working where growth and development will be focused, that's more or less what we've been doing. But it'll be a little more collaborative because the province is no longer telling each one of us what the target should be. It can be organically developed through the local municipal process, which is good. You know your municipalities best and you know your community. There are 93 settlement areas. So what's good density in one is not necessarily good density in the other. And so those are those key considerations that we'll all have to tackle together. And finally, the county's role as the upper tier is always and has and will continue to be provide policy direction for the lower tier municipalities on matters that cross municipal boundaries. So more or less, the county's getting out of the weeds. We're working and setting the stage with you to determine where growth and settlement should be, as we always have, in a less prescriptive, more organically developed environment, and then still dealing with those cross-boundary issues where you've got systems and services that are of regional importance that we'll all continue to work through. So how do you manage the transition? So the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing is going through a consultation on the environmental registry. That consultation closes on October 4th. And what are those things that are in play that we might need a little bit more of an extension of the runway of the growth plan, for instance? So one of those is how do we deal with County Official Plan number 7, which was phase 1 of our MCR? That's a thought that we're continuing to frankly wrestle with municipal affairs and housing staff. The other pieces are the strategic employment districts and policies of the permitted uses. Those permitted uses and those policies are enshrined in the growth plan. But if the growth plan goes away, what guides those uses until all of the local and regional policies can be a little more descriptive? Because historically, we've always leaned on, well, whatever the growth plan says, and the uses are whatever is in a ministerial letter as of a certain date that applies to those. And we have 4 of those. That's in Rammer Road, Innisfil Heights, Bradford West Gwillimbury, and the Lake Simcoe Regional Airport. So having a little bit more of an extension will allow local municipal and the county policies to be able to catch up, further articulate what the permitted uses are, and then the growth plan protection can go away because the local policies have been updated accordingly. And finally, as always, we have Ontario Land Use Tribunal issues that continue to go. So when you have a very considerable policy shift, what policies is the tribunal looking at? You know, what if we've had several case management conferences, planning reports and witness statements have been written under the growth plan, but now the OLT has to consider the PPS 2024. Those are big things that need to be wrestled with, and in fairness to the quasi-judicial process, the ministry should give some considerable thought on what that transition looks like. So what are the impacts to county planning? As I said, the County Official Plan number 7, what does that mean? Well, one of the questions we're commonly asked is, well, now you're allowed to go to 30 years planning horizon. 30 years is 2054. Right now, the planning horizon that's in COPA 7 is 2051. That's only 3 years difference. So for us to redo the numbers for 3 years, it would probably take 1 to 3 years to be able to go through the exercise of rerunning those numbers. So right now, our game plan is work with the province, work with each one of you as local municipal partners to cross the finish line in 2051 with an implementation plan and an update plan on updating those numbers in the near future. But let's finish the race that we started on 2051. That still gives us 27 years of growth. So what are the targets? The targets that we have in COPA 7 were birthed in the growth plan. Should they be changed? Well, that's another discussion we need to continue to have. We've already had a meeting with all the local directors. We're having a meeting with all the local municipal planners in a couple weeks. So these are things that we're still wrestling with. We don't have all the answers because this is, like I said, this is a considerable shift in the way planning is done. And most notably, it's much less prescriptive. So no longer do we have the protection of just looking to the province and saying, well, what did they tell us to do? There's a freedom in that, but there's also some thought that needs to go into that as well. And finally, what are the elements of the MCR that must still proceed? They include the growth management. Where does growth and settlement go? Employment. Where do we need more employment? The MCR Phase 1 said that we need more land to be designated for employment to support the economic opportunities that we see coming down across the region. Finally, the natural heritage system update and the agricultural system update. So key piece in here. During the MCR process, there was a lot of confusion about the agricultural system and the natural heritage system in the growth plan. That's gone away. We still have the county's agricultural designation. That will continue. We will and are updating that mapping. And then the Greenland system, that is our regional natural heritage system. We are updating the Greenlands mapping. The provincial mapping no longer has that effect as of October 20th. We are doing LIDAR, as you've heard in past reports, and we're working through all the latest and greatest information, and you'll see the public part of that process moving forward in the near future. So some key areas to be explored in response to PPS 2024. What is the framework for settlement area boundary expansions? No longer do we have the laundry list in the prescribed process that the province required through the MCR. So how do we as municipalities deal with that? What are the things that we think need to be considered? Are there other things that need to be considered beyond what the PPS 2024 requires of us? Where do we put growth across 93 settlement areas? We do believe that across 93 settlement areas, there is still a need for a hierarchy. Not every settlement area is equal, and not every settlement area can absorb the same amount of growth. And there are infrastructure considerations that need to be had in that. Finally, also, we need to clarify what planned infrastructure means, whether or not it's roads, highways, water, wastewater, stormwater, transit. What is that planned infrastructure? What does the province mean by that, especially on the servicing side? And when can you say yes to growth? And because there's a relationship between you can say yes to growth when there's planned infrastructure. What does planned mean? There's not a lot of clarity there. So we need to be able to identify what that means in our own context. We also need to revise employment lands policies to ensure those protections are there. Tiffany referred to the new, and it's fairly prescriptive piece in the PPS 2024. It's having a bit of a 300-meter halo, if you will, around employment areas. That's to protect those employment areas for what they were intended to be and to protect them from sensitive land uses so they can continue to be thriving into the future. And what about rural development? There's a temptation in the development community. The Simcoe County is a very large geography. There's also a temptation amongst many landowners to develop their rural lands. Yes, it's there, but we need to consider as a whole, as municipal entities who are responsible for delivering long-term growth, what does that mean? Do we have the capacity to treat all that septage? Because, yes, holding tanks and septic tanks only need to be pumped every 4 to 5 years, let's say on average. But cumulatively, what's the impact? And do we as a collective have the ability to absorb that future rural growth? And if not, what do we want to do with it? Do we want to constrain growth in the rural area? Do we want to increase capacity to be able to accommodate some of that? And those are questions that we'd like to continue to ask with you and your local staff. So where are we going from now? We need to figure out what this means to the county OP, and we will be developing a work plan. What it means to update the county official plan alongside some of the MCR work, but also updating some of those policies to be PPS 2024 compliant. We want to be able to shift into the new policy regime in a very quick way so that we're not waiting 5-10 years for a county OP to be updated according to the provincial direction. We need that clarity. Your planners need that clarity, and most of all, residents and taxpayers need that clarity about what they can and can't do with their land in this region. So with that, thank you for your time. Thank you for indulging us on that very quick overview, and we're available for any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Nathan and Tiffany. Questions or comments on the new PPS 2024? Councillor Smith, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Nathan. So Nathan, currently in our municipalities, if developers or landowners come to us and they want to develop and they meet all the criteria of the Planning Act and everything within our bylaws, really nothing we can do to stop them. We could fight, spend a lot of taxpayers' dollars, but at the end of the day, land tribunals would agree with them and we'd end up where we started. As I'm seeing this and I'm going through the information provided, is this going to give us any ability then at the local level and the county level to be able to say in municipalities, we understand we want growth, we need growth, but we might not want it in this specific area. So no, we're not going to allow that to continue, but we look somewhere else in this area and we're fine with it.
Through you, Madam Chair, and that's a great question. The provincial policy statement, or sorry, I should say the provincial planning statement, it's a starting point. We have to remember that it's a provincial-wide document. That's why it's so flexible. It has to apply just as much in Toronto as it does in Cochrane and in Wawa. But that doesn't stop the County of Simcoe and the local municipalities here from articulating where they want growth and development and how they want growth and development. But it's now less informed and less prescribed by the province, and it's more developed at the local and the regional level, and those are conversations that we need to have, you're right. But I think articulating the trajectory of where we want growth and how we want to grow well is even more important now than ever, so that we can deliver our fair share of 1.5 million homes, but in the right place with the right finances supporting it.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Lavoie.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for that presentation. I know these are uncertain times. Could you share that presentation?
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, thank you very much. It would be helpful for those of us who have such committees. With regard to the, may I go ahead? Madam, thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to expansion of settlement areas, I think we sort of understand that. What's the feel for the creation of new ones, particularly by the local municipality, the lower tier? Can you comment on that, please?
Through you, Madam Chair. That's a really good and very common question because it's something that hasn't been allowed to be done in 18 years. So what does it mean? There's still criteria in the new PPS that needs to be met for the establishment of new settlement areas. So there's still a framework and there's still key considerations, not the least of which is what about water and wastewater? What about the fiscal impact analysis? What's the long-term financial outlook for the municipality if those decisions are done? But yes, the opportunity is there, but it has to be thoughtfully considered in accordance with the considerations in the PPS, amongst others that the municipality may also choose to have as well.
Okay, thank you. And just with regard to the appeal rights of parties, I know that there's been quite a bit of change there. Although the ULT doesn't appear to be particularly consistent. What would be the appeal rights of the county on a decision made by the township?
Director?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's also a really good question. Well, it depends on the matter that's at hand. As long as the county remains an upper tier with planning responsibility, our appeal rights don't change. In fact, if it's an official plan matter The county is the approval authority, as you know, with regards to other planning matters that are made at the township level or at the town level. Our appeal rights remain the same as a public body. However, after Bill 23 and after proclamation, those appeal rights disappear. Even as a regional servicing authority providing transit, roads, and waste management amongst many other services and systems, we lose that ability to appeal unless we have land holdings that are directly impacted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Greenlaw.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Nathan. Could you, just for clarity, the 300-meter setback, is that from, would they consider a residential use an equal receptor versus EP or wetlands?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's a great question. I'd have to unpack the EP or wetlands piece. We haven't looked at it from that perspective, but our understanding of the intent of the policy is active land uses rather than EP and associated more passive uses, if you will. Those are more resources that need to be considered rather than active land uses introducing things like schools and residences, if you will. But that's certainly a follow-up that we can provide to council.
Thank you. And then, but an established residential zone, the measurement would be from the receptor, which would be a residential like a residential property or house, to where they could start employment lands.
Once again, I don't think it would be from the residence. The common approach would be to take it from the property line, because then that's not prohibiting any future use of that residential property. But that's, again, one of the many elements that we're trying to unpack with the local municipal planners on how do we roll this out and what does it mean? And most notably, when we're designating new employment lands, how can we make sure that they're protected for the long term?
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, may I have one supplemental, please? In regards to the housing number under the new PPS, so has it been eliminated, or is it now a guideline versus a hard number commitment by a municipality?
Through you, Madam Chair, also a really good question. So right now there's direction in the new PPS for planning authorities to use any other targets that may have already existed. So those numbers wouldn't change. There is flexibility in those numbers, but they're still based on science for when you get into what the land needs are. You have to look at the planned densities, the planned intensification, no different than the process, but there are some nuances, you're right, that we need to understand better. And based on a meeting I had with Municipal Affairs and Housing on Friday, we understand that there's further training being offered to local municipalities and all planning authorities later on in October. And we're hoping to learn some more information about that. So as we learn more, we'd be happy to pass along more about some of those nuances. So the numbers at this point, the numbers from the MCR, we don't anticipate changing. We'd like to cross the finish line, but there is some flexibility about how we apply them when we look at the densities that we use in terms of the land needs.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this presentation. Oh my God, there's so much to keep up in this area. I'm also interested in the 300-meter setback. I think this has the ability to be quite a significant change. I was wondering, I know there is currently separation guidelines from too sensitive uses from farming operations or industrial and so on. Is there any hint yet how those existing guidelines will mesh with this new rule? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's a great question. No hint right now. Some of the other guidelines that relate to industrial uses in proximity to sensitive receptors have been under the purview of the MECP, the Ministry of the Environment. through the D-series guidelines. Those have been on the docket for replacement for a number of years. We have, as municipalities, through many conversations with municipal affairs, have been advocating for the update of those because the time has come. So to your point, we'll continue to do that advocacy, but we have no indication of where they'll go with that in terms of, like you're referring to the MDS guidelines from OMAFRA. They're very prescriptive and there's a formula about how to do it. That would be beneficial for the employment proximity piece, but we have no indication as of yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I had a kind of a cart horse question. So it says you can plan minimum 20, maximum 30 years, but you can plan infrastructure for further than 30 years. But planning infrastructure, basically, like wherever the pipes are is where the houses are going to be. So I wondered about how you dealt with that. Like, wouldn't you be planning if you put pipes in the, or if you're planning to put pipes in the ground for 50 years from now, you're actually planning for where the growth is going to be?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also a really great question, something that's been top of mind and top of conversation, particularly over the last month. We know that many of the municipalities in Simcoe County are facing significant infrastructure investments, and to be able to broaden that by a larger anticipated land holdings, to be able to, amortize that cost is always a useful thing. So right now, the key fundamental piece to understand is that the 30-year limitation is for designation and inside settlement areas, but you can still look at a little more detail on the infrastructure side. The difficulty comes in you can't designate for growth, but you can anticipate through water and wastewater master plans where the optimal next direction of growth should go, either because it's cheaper to service or because there's more optimal places to be able to maximize the land use and the returns thereforth.
Thank you. And notwithstanding that the county will lose its appeal authority, if a local municipality was going to make a decision that maybe had some red flags for the county, are you still able to comment and so that the local municipality can consider those things, even though you have no right to appeal?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. We can still, and we do plan on providing comments in the interest of the county and its services and systems. And we hope that we'll be able to continue to leverage our positive relationships to be able to have positive outcomes on many, if not all, of those situations.
Thank you very much. And lastly, I just wanted to say that I did participate in an Airden Burles training session on the PPS, and they sent me a copy of it. If anybody wants a copy, I'd be happy to send it to you. The piece that was really fuzzy for me was that whole employment piece and saying that institutional is no longer employment. But yeah, so I'd be happy to share if anybody just sends me a quick email. That'd be great. And that, I see no more hands, then I would ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor McDonald and seconded by Councillor Fryer, that item CCW 2024-259 dated September 24th, 2024 regarding the Provincial Planning Statement 2024 summary be received, and that staff prepare a work plan to update the county official plan to the Provincial Planning Statement 2024 and provide this information to County Council for consideration in Q4 2024, and that staff be authorized to provide comments if necessary on transitional matters related to County of Simcoe Official Plan Amendment number 7, which is before the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for approval, and that staff be authorized to retain consulting expertise to review and update the 2026 septage and landfill leachate disposal feasibility study in consultation with area local municipalities, and to confirm the appropriate recommendations for future consideration by County Council. I have one question from that. Q4 2024, you can meet that target? That's pretty aggressive.
We'll bring forward the work.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. The next item is solid waste management. Sorry, did you want? Okay. All right. So There is a recommendation that additional county landfill monitoring and proposed approach following the new per and polyfluoroalkyl substances PFAS objective. Questions or comments on this item? None? Okay. Thank you very much. A mover and a seconder, please, for the recommendation. Councillor Fowler and Councillor Anderson moved and seconded that item CCW 2024-247 dated September 24, 2024 regarding the additional county landfill monitoring and proposed approach following the new per and PFAS objective be received. That authority be granted to include sampling for PFAS in the fall of 2024 at all private water supply wells already included as part of the county's ongoing landfill environmental monitoring program, and that authority be granted to offer to install granular activated carbon water treatment systems at any properties where county sampling as part of the ongoing landfill environmental monitoring program indicates PFAS concentrations are above the new Health Canada objective for PFAS in the private water supply well. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Next, other items for consideration is the Economic Development Subcommittee report. Mover and a seconder, or first, any questions on the Economic Development report? Seeing none, mover and a seconder, please, for that report. Councillor Hull and Councillor Norris, that the recommendation contained within the Economic Development Subcommittee report dated September the 10th, 2024 be approved. All those in favor? That is carried. That is all for me. Thank you, Warden.
Okay, why don't we take a break, and keep in mind, I know I'm going to lose some councillors, and we'll come back just 11 o'clock. All right. Okay, folks, I guess we'll get back to the table. You ready to do it? Yeah. I'm either hearing a cell phone or a radio. I'm not sure what. Oh, okay. Okay. So we are back, and I will turn the chair back to Chair Cox now for performance.
Okay. 14.1 is the consent agenda, that the following consent item having been given due consideration be received. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Voy, second by Deputy Warden Coughlin. Did anybody want to speak to or pull any of these? Okay, all in favor? Carried. 15.1. CCW 224 regular meeting schedule for 2025. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor McDonald, second by Councillor Fryer. That item CCW 2024-198 dated September 24th, 2024 regarding the regular meeting schedule for 2025 be received and subject to amendments as may be provided by the procedure bylaw that the 2025 schedule of regular meetings is generally outlined in item CCW 2024-198 be approved. Anyone have any questions? Yes. Councillor Norcross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question would be, I'd like to put on the floor, would Council consider doing either hybrid or virtual January and February in regards to the discussions we had last year, particularly for some of our members. Councillor Evans, quit staring at me. That have to travel, a fair distance. So I thought I would put that option forward. And
thank you very much.
I have a seconder. Thank you.
It's a question I had just asked the CAO, who's not here now. He was earlier about it, and I think maybe, Patrick can answer at part of it, and then if we have to call a vote, we can, or get a motion. Thank you.
So as some of you may know, there are upgrades going on in the council chambers currently. I can't say for certain that fully hybrid would be available, but fully virtual or fully in-person meetings would certainly be available. Last year, there was a motion brought forward similarly with respect to fully virtual meetings being held in January and February with respect to the concerns with weather, that kind of thing. So certainly that is something that we could consider if you would want to bring a motion forward on that.
Councillor Norcross?
I shall do that then. I'll bring forward that motion. Thank you.
And a seconder? Councillor Briquette?
I thought Councillor Evans wanted to second that, but that's okay.
You're pretty funny. And can I just ask a quick question? We're doing budget on October 29th. Is that it? Is that virtual or here? Because according to our schedule, it's here.
28th virtual. Special budget. Yeah.
Okay, 28th, because that doesn't say it in our schedule.
It should be pink.
No, that's from 2024. That's 2025. The 2024 one. It's virtual. Yeah. Okay, I just thought to let you all know that in October, it's virtual. Does anybody want to speak? Can you... Go ahead.
So the motion that I have, and if you'd like, I can share it on the screen as well, but the motion that I have the wording for is that the Council and Committee of the Whole meetings for January and February of 2025 be held fully virtually.
Joel?
I have a question, if I could, Madam Chair, through to the clerks. So you said that there's some work going on. When do you think, will we ever have the opportunity to do hybrid?
So I can't say for certain at the moment. I apologize for my lack of knowledge on that piece. I know that the upgrades are currently occurring in October, and we anticipate that they will be done for the November 12th meeting. I don't want to confirm that there will be fully hybrid capabilities. I apologize, but I just don't want to confirm that and speak out of turn.
Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. I would be remiss if I didn't throw my 2 cents in with this. I realize that we had this discussion last year, and I realize that some of our more urban members have difficulty driving in the snow, and those of us that live in the rural areas are a little more inclined to get out and enjoy the nice weather in the county of Simcoe and our lovely winter season. Appreciate the opportunity not only to go for a drive, but to come in and share fellowship in this lovely council with our members. So I will say that I'm happy either way to meet with our members, be it in person, which I prefer, or in virtual if need be. So I'll leave my comments at that and hope we can go from there. Thank you, Chair.
GM Wilcox?
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to add and to emphasize what Patrick already said, that there are adjustments to the facilities in here happening, but we haven't tested them. So that's why we're not really saying that it's a viable option at this point in time. It's very easy to do when everybody's all virtual at the same time. It's the hybrid that's the biggest challenge, mainly with coordinating microphones and interference and things like that. So we might have an option for you by then, but I think that's why we can't say for certain at this point. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dolan and then Councillor Cabell.
Madam Chair, I just wondered if the mover and a seconder would consider deferring this until we've had the test of the hybrid system, and then we'll know one way or the other whether that works.
I'm going to let Councillor Cabell and then Councillor Norcroft.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. Some of the municipalities are already engaged in hybrid meetings. I'm just going to suggest that possibly staff reach out to some of those municipalities to see what type of technical difficulties they ran into. They might be easily resolved if you reached out. So just a thought, just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Norcroft?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to respond to Chair Dolan. I'd like to leave the motion on the floor. I'm just going to roll it and see how it goes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm thinking that if we let this go and everybody votes on it, then if the hybrid does come in, we can flip to that and won't be always just virtual. Yes?
I would amend the motion then that we go all virtual, but if hybrid's available, then it's a hybrid meeting. I would gladly add that on.
That's what I think. Yes,
Yep.
Thank you very much.
No, absolutely.
Yes, Councillor Dolan.
Thank you. And just to Councillor Cabell's comment, yes, a lot of the local municipalities have done that, but I think it's a lot easier to have a hybrid meeting with 7 or 9 or 5 than it is with 32. Thank you.
Okay, the clerk. Sorry, I have one more, Patrick. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was starting to have a complex. I thought you were ignoring me. I fully support the motion. I think for many different reasons, members may want or need to attend a meeting virtually, whether it be hybrid or not. But at the end of the day, there's also a cost savings, I think, to the taxpayer on this, where mileage is not having to be paid out, food is not having to be purchased. You know, there's many other reasons. But I think when we look at this day and age and where technology is and where we're going, in the county of Simcoe, we tend to be a leader when it comes to this type of thing. I'm sure that we should be able to figure this out. But I would be willing and fully support, the hybrid model. So to the point, if it's not available, then perhaps we go virtual in January, February for whatever reasons. And if it is available, then give the option to the member. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Patrick?
So just to clarify, I'm hearing sort of two possibilities. So if you could please clarify, Councillor Norris. So one would be that the Council and Committee of the Whole meetings for January and February 2025 be held fully virtually, but there's some discussion about hybrid models as well. So just to clarify, the second option would be that the Council and Committee of the Whole meetings for January and February 2025 be held fully virtually or in a hybrid capacity should the option be available.
Well done. Thank you.
Okay, any other conversations on this? Seeing none, all in favor? I'd say that's carried, but we can see if anybody's opposed. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to 16.1, 2025 high-level draft budget assumption. I'm going to turn this over to GM Wilcox. Thank you. Do we have to? To go back, sorry, and approve the 2025 regular meeting schedule because we went off course a bit. As amended. Patrick, do you want to read it? Or, okay, thank you.
So the full recommendation now is that item CCW 2024-198 dated September 24th, 2024 regarding the regular meeting schedule for 2025 be received, and that subject to amendments as may be provided by the procedure bylaw that the 2025 schedule of regular meetings as generally outlined in item CCW 2024-198 be approved, and that Council and Committee of the Whole meetings for January and February 2025 be held fully virtually or in a hybrid capacity should the option be available.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Fryer, second by Councillor Measures. All in favor? Carried. Okay, GM Wilcox. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Before you use the 2025 high-level draft budget assumptions, in there you will see the usual assumptions regarding different components of funding that we're putting in place, other expenses and initiatives that we fund each year, such as the Hospital Alliance, age-friendly contribution to the reserves, etc., are outlined. The contribution for the Economic Development Planning Reserve, and then capital expenditures for some of the areas as well outlined. So those are the usual assumptions that are put into the budget, and we've highlighted those. We've also highlighted some of the cost drivers that are in there related to electricity, natural gas, water, etc. There is some significant push in certain areas where we're seeing caseloads, as an example, increase. We're seeing demand for our services. As you know, the type of services that we provide are most in demand when times are tough. So it's, I understand that it's a tough economic time, but that's also driving the need for our services, especially in the social services area. And that's reflected will be reflected in the budget as well. So overall, I'm recommending to draft the budget with a 2% increase related to the capital side for the asset management planning that we've been putting in place. We've put an estimate in for the asset management plan that will be needed this year when we draft the final plan that will go to the province, and then a 2% increase for operating expenses. As a reminder, with operating expenses, or as a couple examples, we have had some recent settlements for salaries and benefits and some increases that we've reflected now in the budget, so that's driving some of the cost increases there. As another example, we have an index that's called the Non-Residential Building Construction Index, and that's really a reflection of construction costs and how those increase. And from 2021 to 2023, that index rose at an average of 16%. The contribution that we receive towards those kind of initiatives is the CCBF, or what used to be the old gas tax fund. That has increased at 2%. So it's creating a gap where while the funding is still there, the funding is not kept pace with inflationary pressures. So that puts pressure again on needing an operating balance big enough so they can contribute to capital and contribute to things that we're purchasing. We don't want to really borrow for, even internally, for things like vehicles, as an example. So what I'm proposing to do is to draft the budget with that overall 2% for capital components and our asset management plan, the 2% increase related to operating, but also show what the budget would be if there was a 0.5% higher or 0.5% lower. Let it flow through so it basically show different levels of operating balance that we could use. And in the budget, we'll actually show, we'll have the particulars for each area and where the pressures are coming in. So that's what's outlined in the budget assumptions document. I'm happy to entertain any questions on that. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Locke.
Thank you, through the chair. That was my recommendation, was going to be possibly to have a couple different models, especially a 3.5%, and rather than us councillors try to pick and choose which dump truck we don't want or which shovel or this or that. You guys that are the experts there can weed through and go, we don't need these, whatever, 10 specific items to get the 3.5%. I personally, I'm not looking for 4.5. It's either 4 or less would be what I'd be looking for anyways. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fryer.
Thank you, Chair Cox, and through you to the General Manager. I agree fully as well. It's great to have those other looks at what the variance would be, because I was going to start to ask questions about the annual assessment growth estimate. It's based on 5 years, and thinking about the fact that part of those years were COVID and things like that. But if we're already doing some fluctuation look, then I don't need to talk about the 2% that's there now. We'll be incorporating that kind of in the whole scheme. So appreciate the fact that you're going to give us that additional information. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Jim.
If I could just speak to that one point about the growth rate on the levy. The reason that we went to a 5-year average is because it's impossible for us to exactly guess that number. And while it will lag, it lags both up and down. So, but it moderates because it's a rolling average. So there could be an argument that we're entering a higher growth phase. And we're hopeful that that's the case. Interest rates are coming down and things should help out. But it's really hard to predict the timing on that, exactly how that would impact us. So that's why we've been using the 5-year rolling. So, but to your point, there may be variations in that.
Thank you. Just it was just going to be a discussion of it, but you're already talking about providing some fluctuation analysis when you're looking at the 4% anyway. So I'm fine with all that. And I appreciate the extra explanation, though.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Trevor. Trevor, have we had any discussions with the province or with MPAC as to where they're at? I mean, for the town of Wasaga Beach, when we look at our taxes and our budget every year, MPAC on average is about 2% that we're just not seeing, and so we're needing to make up the difference. So I'm assuming that with the county, it's probably 0.5 to 1/3%, but it's significant, no matter how you look at it from a dollars and cents standpoint. So I think it's time that we all start having these conversations and really pushing this conversation. I mean, it's I understand when COVID came, they thought it was the wrong time, but I mean, we're long past that, and it's time to get back on track, and it's having a negative impact on each of our municipalities.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for that comment. Yes, we have not heard any change in terms of valuations, which is, I think, what you're getting at in terms of how the assessment is still based upon 2016 values at this point. So it's way behind. I do want to recognize that that could be a big concern for certain municipalities, only because, not because of the total value of the increase, it just changes the way the pie is divided. So certain segments of our municipality, certain residential types could experience some significant increases. We haven't got a feel for when that's going to happen, and we haven't got any analysis on where those potential jumps are. So I think at this point the province is just holding and has decided that they're not going to change it at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dolan.
And just to add to that, I want to say it's not for the lack of us asking. So there's been, so the ministry has decided they're doing a full review of MPAC right now. And they haven't given, all they've said, they've announced they're going to do the review, but not the terms of reference for that review. So MPAC is, you know, kind of waiting on that. But also, AMO's been asking for years for that reassessment to take place, but not getting any traction at this point. My question on the forecast, and I don't need an answer today, Jim Wilcox, but maybe when we have our virtual budget meeting, is I'd like to understand more the savings from the producers taking over the blue box and how much we're saving from that and how those savings are being rolled into the budget. Thank you.
Through the chair, certainly those kind of details will be outlined in the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Measures?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. GM Wilcox, I just was wondering about, being that we're a county and other regions, they still receive OSIF from the Province of Ontario CIF fund. Has there been any indication that that is being reassessed for the regional governments and county governments, given that I know our small municipality of Clearview has seen very small increases in that? Have you heard anything about that from the provinces, whether they've been doing any adjustments to OSIF given the large populations of the regions?
Through the chair, not significant. I turn to the treasurer if he's got any insight recently.
Through the chair, historically we received approximately $4 million from OSIF. That at this point we don't have not heard of any increases to that amount for the upcoming year.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none? I think I already got a mover and a seconder. No, I didn't. Okay, I need a mover and a seconder, please, to put the motion on the floor. Moved by Councillor Prost, seconded by Councillor Fowler, that recommendation CCW 2024-232 dated September 24th, 2024, regarding 2025 high-level draft budget assumptions be received, and that subject to deliberations in the affirmative, the proposed draft budget assumptions and directions outlined in item CCW 2024-232 dated September 24th, 2024, be approved and incorporated into the 2025 County of Simcoe draft budget. All in favor? Carried. 16.2, the 2024 forecast report. I'm going to turn this over to GM Wilcox again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Before you is the forecast report for this year. I'll take you through a few areas that are of concern and some that are mitigating that. So we've had significant cost overruns in a couple of areas. One of them is paramedic services, largely driven by overtime, inflationary costs, and especially around vehicle maintenance. In terms of that area. In long-term care, you've heard it many times that agency costs are driving costs higher in terms of us needing to use agency costs where they are much more expensive than standard salary and benefit employee. We've been trying to fill all the shifts, but now with the mandate also for more hours, that's driving that need as well further. And then in Simcoe County Housing Corporation, there has been significant inflationary pressures as outlined in the report that it's driven costs up. There have been some offsets to that. So, and also the inflationary pressures in social housing was move-outs, an increase in move-outs. We're thinking post-pandemic kind of impacts that are hitting us now. Those have increased in year. We're hopeful that those will level out as things kind of moderate. Offsets to that, nonprofit housing was below budget, so that helped offset some of those. In solid waste management, we also had lower costs and a little bit more revenue. We had capacity in one of our landfills that we were able to continue using, and we didn't have to incur export costs. And then the levy forecast was slightly higher than our original budget. So with that, I am projecting, our team is projecting a modest, right now, deficit. First time that I've ever done that, I think, since I've been here. So it is very close. It's a challenging year. We are still working on trying to close that. If need be, as you know, we cannot run a deficit. We would have to figure out how we're going to close that in terms of using reserve dollars or something like that. I'm not really concerned at the magnitude that we're seeing. I don't see that being kind of an issue at this point in time. But it is about $300,000 deficit that I'm projecting. And again, we're working to close that. With that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions? Councillor Fryer.
Thank you, Chair Cox. And first off, my compliments to staff. I think coming in, even though we are, as you say, looking at a small deficit, and the information you provided to me with my questions I asked online last week, you're showing the impact of investment income alone is $250,000, which is probably just about a 2% that you're out. And solid waste management, sales, scrap metal, and things like that is down 219. So those two alone are that small deficit that you have. All the other things that you've put together have come out pretty much bang on budget. So again, compliments to staff. The things that stood out to me were in regards to the waste management, and there was a question there earlier about waste management, just getting it here. The balance was a loss of almost $58 million in 2023, and the forecast for this year is just under $53 million. So you're looking at about a 10% reduction through the waste management budget on the impact on ish, and I thought that was very, very good. And then likewise with transit. Transit's come in with just looks like about a 6% increase in cost, and transit is such a difficult thing to deal with, and to put that service out there, I consider it somewhat a social service because it's needed to be out there. But again, I just wanted to compliment staff and appreciate the information that you provided back and how accurate the budget has been. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Member Snell, seconded by Member Fryer. That it's item CCW 2024, dated September 24th, 2024, regarding 2024 forecast report be received, and that subject to deliberations in the affirmative, item CCW 2024-249, regarding the 2024 forecast report be approved. All in favor? Carried. 17.1, Ontario Works Lease Bradford. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Sandhu, seconded by Councillor Councillor Norris. Sorry, I just had a blank. I can only remember your first name. Any questions? that item CCW 2024-244 dated September 24th, 2024, regarding a lease agreement between Simcoe County Housing Corporation and the Corporation of the County of Simcoe for a social and community services office in Bradford, Ontario be received, and that the necessary bylaw be presented to County Council to authorize the warden and clerk to enter into a lease agreement for a social and community services office in Bradford, substantively in the form attached to Schedule 1 to item CCW 2024-244. Any questions? Comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Performance management, other matters for consideration. Audit and Finance Committee report, September 17th, 2024. May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Smith, second by Councillor Misking, that recommendations contained within the Audit and Finance Committee report dated September 17th, 2024 be approved. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. 18.2, Special Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee report, September 5th, 2024. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Norcutt, second by Councillor Evans, that recommendations contained within the Special Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee report dated September 5th, 2024 be approved. Questions? All in favor? Carried. 18.4, Bursary Committee report, 18.3 and 18.4. Bursary Committee, mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Voy, second by Councillor Locke, that the following Bursary Committee reports be approved. Bursary Committee report September 17th, 2024. Bursary Committee confidential report September 17th, 2024. Any questions? Yes.
Just a comment, I want to congratulate the committee. There was a couple hundred names that came in, and you guys buckled down and went through it, and it went amazingly smooth, because when they scored, the scores come out so close. So congratulations to that committee.
Councillor Burkett.
Through you, Madam Chair, to your worship, thank you very much for those kind words. But I think there were 1,000 pages. There were 294 applicants, and I wish I could have given them all the bursary. They were all well done, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes. Did you call the vote? No, we're still waiting on the vote.
No, we talked. Okay, all in favor? Carried, sorry.
I know you're very efficient, but I do need the vote. Is there any need to go in camera? We've seen the agenda. There's a couple land acquisitions there. What's the feeling of council? Anybody? Okay, I'm not seeing any then, so I will move forward to the motions. The direction in camera and recommendations contained within confidential item CCW 2024-257 dated September 24, 2024 regarding the proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land be approved and voted upon in accordance with section 239(6)(b) of the Municipal Act. Moved by Councillor Fryer, second by Councillor Evans. All in favor? That is carried. And the second one, the direction in camera and recommendations contained within confidential item CCW 2024-269 dated September 24, 2024 regarding a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land be approved and voted upon in accordance with section 239(6)(b) of the Municipal Act. Moved by Councillor Norris, second by Councillor Snell. All in favor? That is carried. And listen, I'd be remiss, I meant to have it on our agenda. Truth and Reconciliation Day is, of course, at the end of the month. We will be celebrating it and proclaiming. It wasn't in my proclamations. We'll make sure it is there next month when we review. So that day will be recognized. I apologize for not having that in the agenda. And again, following the meeting now, we'll have the flag raising for Francophone, I want to make sure I get this right, Francophone Ontarian Day, which recognizes our French heritage in this area. So that will be immediately following and over at the museum. So I will look for a motion that the September 24th, 2024 Committee of the Whole be adjourned at 11:34. Moved by Councillor McDonald, second by Councillor Evans. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you.